Hello, I'll be doing a short tutorial on sending information from Particle to AWS. Um, and so the screen you're looking at right now is the Particle console, and you're seeing information come in from my Photon that's connected to a small sensor that is shooting back temperature in Fahrenheit, Celsius, and we're getting pressure too. And so I'm getting a couple of errors. I'm getting two different types of errors. And I know why I'm getting the two of them. I entered in different pathways for two of them because I'm trying to still figure out the integration to the Amazon or the AWS API gateway. So anyway, everything in the serial monitor is information that's coming back from the Photon. And so right now we're going to look at the integrations, the webhooks. And these are the F-temp, C-temp, and pressure down here, the three webhooks I made to send information out. And I'm just going to take a look at one. So this is F-temp, this is Fahrenheit, that's the event name. This is the URL where it's sent to. And the reason that I'm getting a different error is because right here, this path, in the curly brackets, it says core, and that's the index name off the Dynamo table. It's not really working right, but the table isn't working right either, so I'm just trying to play around with things. But the error is missing token authentication with that path. And this is the rest of the webhook. It's a post, HTTP post, JSON, device is Photon. And this is the information, this is the JSON information that is sent with the webhook to the API gateway for AWS, and these are the headers. And this is the trigger integration that I plugged into my own code that I'm not going to show. And this is the integration response that you can plug into your code that allows you to view on the serial monitor Particle if your information is being received correctly from the API. And so let's go down a little bit further and let's click on one of these, and this will give us an idea of what's going on as well. So that's the event that's being passed, and that's the request, and this is the response with the error for that path. So I think we can travel over to AWS now. Basically, I did this same thing, but instead of with AWS, I sent everything to ThingsSpeak, and everything worked well. That was these three webhooks right here. And so I was able to get the information out and look at it on a different platform. I couldn't get it to integrate with AWS, but let's look at it anyway. I was able to plug information in on the API gateway for AWS that resembled the JSON data that Particle was trying to send, and everything was able to go through to the Dynamo table and be queried from the browser. But I just couldn't nail down why the JSON data from, or maybe the pathway from Particle wasn't integrating with the API gateway from AWS. And so let's take a look at the API gateway. So the APIs in AWS, they have two ways of getting the categorizing the information. It's resources and methods. Resources can be our pathways, and table one is the Dynamo table, so they can also be tables. I think they just are able, they put you in different services for AWS, and this one happens to be the Dynamo table. And then after that, my method is post, and it's an HTTP method post. And everything that goes through the Dynamo table, it has to be a post, even though you see get down here. I'll talk about that in a second. But everything has to be a post that goes to it. I don't know why, but I followed that rule. And so if we take a look at the mapping now, so the data, it meets up at a stage, and I'll just go through the stage quickly. And so basically, the information that's coming in is going to this is the URL that I plugged into the webhook and particle. And so that's where the outside API gateway that I'm sending the information to. And after it hits there, it travels through the ARN to the integration request. And here the information has to be, the JSON information has to be manipulated a little bit for the Dynamo table to make sense of it. And so if you can remember what the JSON data looked like before in Particle, this is what it has to look like in order for the Dynamo table to make sense of it. And so that's what it looks like when it's being integrated from the JSON data being sent by webhook to being sent and read by the Dynamo table. And all right, we won't go back there. And so, and also down here is something called a policy and a role. In a policy and a role, they sort of follow each other around the AWS environment. You have a role, and your role has permissions attached to it. And so everywhere you go, you know what you can and can't do because of the role you have and the policies attached to that role. And so for this project, I had to make up my own policy, and I attach it to a role. And then this is the ARN. It's called the execution role that is used in order to validate the things I want to do for AWS. And so if we go back, or actually let's do a quick test here. So we're going to do a test of the mapping. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug information in that resembles the data. Boy, this little icon's right in front of the information I need. So, you know what? We're going to do a test for this instead. For the get method, this is where you query the information out of the database. And this is the mapping for the get method. The core and the curly brackets, that's the index. And this is the ARN, the ARN. And here for integration request, you'll see what we had to do differently in order for Dynamo to accept it. We had to change it to a post. So it's a post. If I understand, it's a post wrapped in a get. And instead of put item, we're going to query the information. And we use the same policy in the role that I did before. And let's do a test on this. If we enter in, okay, before I explain that, before we do that test, let me explain the tables. The table I used was table 1. And the items, and these are the items I have in it. These are the items that I've sent to it. And then you have indexes too. And I think the indexes keep track of the items and you query from the index. Core ID is the, I guess it's that's the primary key that I use in order to search the database, if I understand it correctly. So I have to pick one of these values that is associated with core ID, and when I do, it will allow me to view all the information that is associated with that core ID. So the core ID was supposed to represent different Photon, the identifications form. So that's what you're seeing here, even though those don't resemble identifications at all. But if 34 was an identification, it would send me the data for that, the name for that, and the published, the time it was published. So if I want to query that information, I could either enter in 34 dog4 particle or 345. So I'm going to put in 34. So right here, I'm going to put in 34. And so what I got back was the queried information from the table. And so everything associated with the core ID of 34, that information was given back to me. And if we go to the stage again, that's on the get method, and we use this URL, we click on that URL, what I can do is I can query from the browser, and I can put 34 in, and it'll come back with all the information that's associated with core ID of 34. Or I can put 4 in. 4 was another one I just had memorized that's also associated with it. Then a different table will come back, and that was all the information that's associated with the core ID of 4. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the information to transfer from the webhooks to the API gateway. I couldn't figure it out. I could get the webhooks to transfer information to ThingSpeak, which was in a tutorial from Particle, and that worked fine. It was just getting the information and the JSON data, I guess, onto the API, because from the API to the Dynamo it worked fine, and then querying it from the Dynamo worked fine. It was I guess just that communication between those two. So that's it. Thank you very much.